All right, it's 11 o'clock. Let's get this thing started. My name is Trent Zimmermann, and I'm the annuities director here at BGA Insurance. BGA Insurance is a wholesaler working with independently licensed agents on life insurance, annuities, long-term care, and disability. I myself have a bachelor's with background in economics, a master's in finance. I'm a chartered financial consultant and chartered life underwriter. And this is your 20 minutes. Today we're talking about Social Security offset. We've touched on this a few times. I want to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into it, dispel some myths as well about it. So this is also going to be a short one. Probably going to be shorter than 20 minutes. So before I do, I want to share a an idea for you that you can use if you're out of the state of California. Now, a lot of the people here are in California, but if you have any clients outside of California, I shared it last week. I think it's a clever strategy of an accumulation annuity that has a 10-year MYGA inside of it for the fixed rate. That produces 4%. Uh, then they have a very high participation rate, very high cap rate, volatility controlled index, but I know I don't like volatility controlled indexes. This one has been tied pretty closely to the S&P 500. It's based on the S&P 500. It's a 15% volatility controlled. Typically, you get with each 5%, you get a third of um, the performance. That hasn't been as true for a lot of them. Once you get higher up to 15%. But this is an intraday one. It's a lot closer. It's been within 2% in the S&P 500 for the last 10 years. Um, and really, when we get to that 2%, that's really only been in the last year that's separated it a little bit more because of volatility of the Iran war. So it's been performing well, but you get a lot higher cap and you get a lot higher participation rate out of it. And the idea is that you put 25% into the fixed, you hold that 4% for 10 years, you put the remainder in the S&P 500 IQ volatility control, whatever they call it. And on a bad year, if you get a zero, you're now increasing that zero floor up to 1%. And if you do well, now you're getting the same amount you would have with the lower cap, lower participation rate you would have in the S&P 500. So you're now saying I'm going to get the SP 500 performance with a 1% floor. I think it's a very clever design. Now, done with that idea, we're going to go back into Social Security offset. And let's say you've listened to these for a while. And you said, Trent, I know there's a number. I know there's a number that they're never going to outlive their money. Their core expenses are going to be covered. Chance in a Monte Carlo analysis of portfolio depletion is less than 1%. In over three-quarters of historical backtest, you show greater terminal portfolio size with an annuity than without. Eliminate core concerns. You could probably repeat this in your sleep. You know the Morgan Stanley studies. You know the BlackRock studies. You know Blanchett. You know the Nobel Prize winners that talk about this. You even know Dr. Fow's retirement income style awareness, and you're saying, Trent, what else can you show me? I know I need to get an income annuity to cover the bases. I know time segmentation and equity growth. And if we can afford to do it, let's throw in that risk wrapper. And hopefully it's going to be something like a VA or RILA or even an FIA. But we can even build out, if they're healthy, a LIRP plan, a life insurance cash value IUL. And so, like we said, these Morgan Stanley studies gain the minimum 10% higher terminal wealth, 19% higher probability of sustaining income. And you know the portfolio freedom effect. You've heard all this. You've heard it week after week after week. You know that they can allocate up to 100% in equities, get more aggressive, be in the compounding period for longer, uh, and be able to experience the largest growing asset class that we have access to. And that's being involved in equities in long term. And long term, most stable asset class to be in. Short term, the most volatile. So we want to be in long term plays and not being forced to sell in down market, slow the AUM depletion rate, and prevent your clients from panic selling and buying high selling low. So you know all this. You could say it back to me in your sleep, but you have clients, and clients do different things. We had a client recently who got a large inheritance and was planning their retirement off of this inheritance and had retired 10 years earlier and were just depleting their money waiting for this inheritance to come. And when it came, they had that money and they were going to sell their house. And they decided to buy car, bike, refurbish the house before selling it and all this stuff. And now they burned through so much money that an annuity no longer could cover the amount that they needed to live on. So then we started looking at a flat annuity instead of a growing annuity. And even that, we couldn't get enough money out of it. And so then we started looking at investing some and having some put on the side. And that scared the client because they're highly conservative about their money. And now they can't do any of the plans that they wanted to do because they decided to blow the money before ever talking to an advisor. All these plans work, but we have clients. We have clients that do stuff that we think, why the heck would you ever think before getting your financial plan in line to pay full cash on a $100,000 car and then get upgrades to it? Why would you do that? Get your money stream going, and then we can budget for something. And do you really need that car? Or can you do the $80,000 version of it, or the $60,000 version of it, or even the $40,000 version of it? Because you're just driving on the streets. So we have clients. The clients do crazy things. And let's say they're retiring early. And cost of covering their expenses now is too high with an annuity because we're looking at 62 versus 70. An optimal annuitization amount is less than their core costs. So now we're having to cover some with investments. They need to free up some money for reserves, and they have, or they have a fear or lack of interest around annuities. And so you think the retirement distribution hatchet could work. And this is where I'm going to dispel some myths, but also talk about the benefits of this that could come on the back end. And so you think, okay, well, maybe we can get this cheaper by covering Social Security in the front end, delaying to 70, and then deploying an annuity at that point. And you know the numbers here. Delaying Social Security from 62 to 70 increases the benefits by 77%. For example, we're talking about this year's numbers. Retiring, if you're 62, you're going to get maximum amount of 29.27 a month. And if you're 70, you're going to get 51.81 a month. So that's a $2,253 difference. Now, if we're using these numbers, we're not having any other growth in it, and we're including COLA growth inside of that. That grows to about 2,800 a month. And so over a lifetime, if we're looking at live to 95, which a lot of life insurance products are going to be built off of, um, we're looking at a difference of $395,000 without cost of living increases. But when factoring in the average, which is 2.8, it grows to a $955,000 difference. So if we're looking at covering this difference to cover the baseline it on a period certain SPIA for 8 years. It's going to cost $235,000. On the top end, if we're covering the maximum amount for 70, because that's the number we're trying to get to, and we're building an annuity off of that number and getting that immediate today, and this is a second one to tier on and fall off at a certain point, we're paying $415,605. So that's great because off of these numbers, you're getting a growth rate that would require you to have a 8.8% growth rate on your money in order to have the same kind of payouts. Now, the S&P historically has done better than that at 10.44. If according to their numbers, if we're looking at the real returns of people invested in the market, we're looking at 7.9. So it doesn't actually keep up. But we're not, let's just say you had somebody who was stringent enough to be investing in a S&P 500 in ETF with no fees. They, theoretically, they could have gotten better. But we now run into sequence of return risk. And what if there's a down year and we're pulling from a down year and we're causing an even larger loss that and increased drag that we now need to make up for? You've seen the charts, and I probably should have thrown this in here of the drag of volatility. That if you're losing 20%, you don't need to make back up 20%. You need to make back up 25%. And now with this type of pull out of your money, we're now going to have to make up 30%, 32%. So S&P could have done that. Real returns in the markets around 7.9. You wouldn't have kept up with that. But now most people wouldn't have been invested in that if they're needing to pull this money out for the next 10 years. They would have been in safe money. And nothing can compete. The highest returning asset of long-term corporate bonds, which you wouldn't want to be in for short-term pulling out on a monthly basis, would be 6.3%. Current CD rates are at 3.95. So in order to get this of having an annual growth rate of 8.8%, and that's on a consistent basis month to month to pull out that 5,181. Nothing can compete with this. You'd want to get an annuity. But there's a big downside. Annuities are really efficient and all costs about the same. So I had this plan of going through all these numbers and having these charts up, but it really doesn't change anything. I think it'll be more confusing than not. The difference was $50,000. Some ways of cutting this up, it was $50,000 less. Some ways of cutting it up, it was $50,000 more. On what cost to get you a flat $120,000 a year, including Social Security and your annuity, to get that amount of money cost $1,150,000. So we were looking at 1.2 million and 1.1 million in saying maybe we'll cover that 120 for 10 years, and then we have a FIA that's been deferring, and that will hit 73. The SPIA will fall off, and Social Security will kick in as well. Or we have a smaller FIA that's paying out now, and we have a period certain SPIA on top of that, and that will fall off, and Social Security will replace it. All these ways of doing it, we're all about the same price because annuities are really efficient at their job. So if we're saying we're going to get a lump sum earlier and we're going to defer some money to get later, or we're going to get a smaller amount now going forward and just get something to wrap around it. However we cut it up, it was all about the same price as getting Social Security today and an annuity on top of it. So why would you do it? Why would you delay Social Security? Well, because of the compounding effect. And in an annuity, unless you're getting Allianz and you're getting the increasing income, which is the only annuity that will increasing income after the cash value is depleted, it's going to be flat. You don't want to get the increasing income. It's never going to, the money's not going to ever amount to increasing larger than what you would have gotten with the flat. And if it does, it's a very nominal amount that will take a long time for it to pay for itself. So we're getting a compounding effect on having a higher floor at 70 than we would have at 62. Let me go back to those numbers. We're looking at the compounding effect of anywhere from $395 to $955,000 by age 95. So the question now becomes, it's not about saving money. That's why I wanted to dispel those myths of oh, if the annuitized amount's high and we can cut it up this way, we can maybe get this to be a little bit cheaper so that we could squeeze this through. The client's made a choice, and it's going to be tough to get around that. Unless you can convince them to go back to work or delay for another year or allocate their money in a different way. Or find companies that are more comfortable with qualified funds being put put in there at a larger rate than the 70% standard that's suitable. So the question now isn't how can we save money on this? Because those questions about delaying and trying to get that increase now falls on the client's psychology. But if they can afford to do this, if they can afford to retire at 62, then the question becomes for them, are they willing to put $50,000 more in? Maybe, depending on how you do it, it could be $50,000 less uh, in order to get $118,000 at 80, $360,000 at 85, 638,000 at 90. You see the ballooning effect. And that, we're going to look at the guarantee with if there were no COLA increases, $16,000. And if you have a really conservative client, they're not in good health, they might look at that at 80 and say, "Oh, I don't know about that." But you get to 85 and it starts to be convincing that your money's tripled, at least guaranteed, closer to 7 times. And when we're looking at how that money would have to perform in your portfolio, we're looking at some pretty crazy numbers. But that's the effective compound. And we're looking at 69% annual increase if you lived 100. So the question when we're looking at this retirement distribution hatchet and delaying Social Security to increase that floor, the story isn't can we save money by having them delay Social Security and then getting a smaller annuity later, or getting a smaller annuity today and wrapping something around it that will fall off. The story is, are you willing to invest maximum $50,000? Maybe $50,000 less based on this $10,000 a month number. Are you willing to put that money in there to have it double in 18 years? Are you willing to put in $50,000 to have it increased by 7 times in 23 years? And so on and so forth. And have an increasing income floor of Social Security, and then having your equities put away that are going to grow and having some time segmentation. This is the big mover in their retirement, not the saving of money. So it's an easy one today. It's a short one today. Honestly, that's all I got for you. But I know this story is being told. I wanted to dispel some myths and look at the math of it. And next week, we're going to talk about Roth conversions. There's a lot of people selling Roth conversions based off of bonuses. It makes me very nervous. I think there's smarter ways to do it. If you are using a bonus program, I think there's smart ways to do it if you're using a high cap product. And we're going to explore that. We're going to talk about what that looks like next week. So in terms of that, please call me, email me, reach out if you have any questions, if you have any cases. Also, if you have any ideas for uh, uh, future webinars, please reach out, throw it in the chat, send me an email. Happy to do a deep dive on these.